And we're live. Make sure everything is running appropriately. And it appears to be running appropriately. Yeah, and there's nobody here yet. That's fine. It's Max, and we're back for anybody who's going to be watching this in a playback. I'm just going to go ahead and start because I don't really want to be on very long. I just want to talk about a couple of things that kind of came to my mind here. Where I received an email in regards to somebody who had been watching my older content a couple of years ago and were really hammering down the lordship, work, salvation, and particularly why I was down and why I considered Catholicism a cult and why Jehovah's Witnesses and some others. And my response is, quite simple for anybody out there who doesn't know. If you're not following fundamental Christianity, where essentially your salvation rests on Christ alone and his shed blood to pay for your sins, then you're in a works-based cult. Now, it might be a very nice cult. It might be a very rich cult. The people might be very nice. They might dress all snazzy. They might have fun little shindigs where you get together and play guitar and have a little party or whatever they do. Might be great, but that is not going to lead you to salvation. Okay, you cannot work at all for your salvation. Ephesians 2, 8, and 9, as I have pulled up on the screen. For grace you are saved, okay? Not of works, lest any man should boast. Now, as an explanation to that, what that means and what that verse is telling you is that God would owe you something. If you could work for your salvation, God would owe you something. If you could work for your salvation, you yourself would be Jesus Christ, okay? Which is what a lot of religions teach, okay? A lot of New Age stuff, a lot of other whatevers. The Catholicism teaches basically the Pope is Christ on earth, has the power to forgive sins, and then through all of his little pedophile priests, they can all forgive sin too, okay? Complete, total heresy. That got me thinking about, of course, with the things going on in, and of course we gotta start wars now because the cooties is over. 1 week the cooties ends, and then the next week we're gonna go to war, right? And why people even pay attention to it or anything, I don't know, but we got to realize, and it might be a little bit of a bummer to people, but people, by the people and for the people and all this crap that they sling in America and probably other countries too. It's like, that's not the case, guys. And you guys all know it, that you don't tell the government what to do. The government tells you what to do. Okay. Now the title of this, I said the government is Satan's religion. Okay. Because the government tells you what effectively is a moral thing or an ethical thing and what is something they don't like. Okay. That's the religion system. Now, being of what we know about fundamental Christianity and what we know about all the cults out there, about how you cannot work for salvation in fundamental Christianity, what is the government all about? If you mess up, you're working to pay a fine. You're working to do this. You're working to do that. You're working for the government. You're working for this, for that. I want everyone to know that regardless of what you might think of yourself, wherever you are in whatever country you're in, you're all considered criminals because nobody has followed the laws of the land 100% perfectly. And that is by design. That is Satan's counterfeit. All right. But what happens when you speed and you get a speeding ticket? Well, you work and you pay the fine, and then you're all good with God, the government. Okay. That's how that works. And of course, it draws, of course, direct parallelism to Catholicism, which I think is actually one of the puppet masters behind the Federal Reserve and where all these governmental systems come into place, right? Complete works-based, and it's replacing actual God's morality, God's laws, with Satan's laws, where as long as you don't break the law to the government, what the government thinks is bad, then you're a good person, right? So abortion is cool. all these weird, crazy things they're teaching in schools to 3-year-olds is all cool about LGBTQ, whatever, is all cool because that's the government's morality. And that's the counterfeit. All right. That is the counterfeit. So that's just to get us started. And it looks like people are actually here now. So I guess it doesn't send a notification. I planned this. I think I set it up 20 minutes early. Must not send a notification until I actually go live. So whatever. Good to see you all here. We'll take a look at what's going on here. Oh, we got Jason. We got Josh. How you guys doing? Josh, how are things? Well, I had a really long, rough day at work, and then I came home and found that my furnace was out. So not great. And then I called around to different plumbers, and no one's available until next week. And yeah, that's how that goes. That is how that goes. Jason, you're talking about left-wing parties. You don't want to fall into any of that system, which is kind of a side trail to what I want to talk about is that, guys, the government is not your friend. Okay. All the stuff, all the rhetoric and all those things up there, that's all Satan's little playground. None of that stuff is real. It doesn't matter. And people who talk about how they can change the government or do this and do that, it's like the government tells you what to do. The government decides if you are a bad person or a good person based on whomever is in charge of the government at the time. People don't have any control over this stuff. As much as they like, oh, I can go vote. It's like, oh, good luck with that. Didn't work out so well for Trump. All right. It's just what it is. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. So just to go back is, so people don't have to rewind it here. We're talking about why I was so down on different various sects of Christianity or people calling themselves Christians or something like that. And it all comes down to the salvation message and that most everybody else except fundamental Christianity believes in works. And that's, a direct parallel to the government. And the way things are now is the government morality is replacing actual fundamental true morality, and that's of course all by design. And you think, well, what can I do when I'm here and I've like got to deal with all this stuff and the government breathing down your neck and wars and people getting drafted and all this stuff? And it's like, people like lose hope, and get real down. I mean, I've been kicked in the gonads quite a bit in the last 6 months, right? And it's like you have to take a step back and realize that y'all know where you're going. Okay, as bad as things are going to get, okay, because things in the world here are progressively getting worse, and we can see the new world order right over the horizon there. All right. And it's like, man, you just don't want to be here, don't want to live in all this. And you have to understand, y'all know where you're going. And you also have to understand that everybody is here for a purpose and a reason. And nobody knows what that is, but God, and God doesn't do things without purpose. It goes against God's nature. God doesn't do vanity. Okay. So whatever it is that people are here for is like, don't lose sight of the fact, you know where you're going. All right. Whatever happens. And don't think that, things are meaningless, right? If you're really, really poor and you don't have much of a life and it's a dead end job and all this stuff, you know where you're going, and something you're here for has some meaning. God created you for a reason, right? And try your best not to listen to what the government has to say about things, because that is Satan's system. All right. And that doesn't mean go out and go break a bunch of laws and stuff, but just don't think if the government thinks it's okay, then it must be moral or it must be good, because it's not. J420, how you doing? So anyways, I do want to bring up again and bullet point the fact that, as it is, as Christianity teaches and the Bible teaches, is that we're all sinners. We're all guilty. We've all come short of the glory of God. Satan's counterfeit is the government. All right. Like I said, if we look at all the laws on the books, because they never go away. In America, we've been doing laws for 150 years. At some point, people have broken the law in there. Everybody of driving age has had a traffic ticket. That would make you a criminal. All right. So everybody's a criminal. How do you get out of being a criminal? You pay your ticket. You do some jail time. You do this, you do that. You're working your way out of being a criminal. That's not God's system. That's a phony system. Very phony system. Right now, you're a criminal if you don't take a cooties jab, right? If you don't wear your mask. Well, that's going away. But that's where whoever has the money just dictates what your morality or your ethics are going to be. And that's not right. That is not right. J420 have been following me for a while. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And hopefully you've seen a, transition of some sorts, all the way through the years. And hopefully you can see my message has stayed pretty well as straight as can be. It's one thing that myself and like Ed, a few other people out there is we're not all over the place. We're not talking out of both sides of our mouth. We have the truth. This is what the truth is. And I, of course, have my own opinions regarding circumstances and things that are going on in the world, right? But as far as the Bible goes, and as far as salvation goes, and as far as the truth, try to keep it consistent. And yeah, I do try to keep it real. I'm not a pastor. I don't try and present myself as the leader of a church. Okay. I'm just a dude who studies the Bible, and Bible talking dude is what I went by for the first few years that I was starting. And that's all I'll stick to. And I'm persistent. I've been doing this stuff for 9-10 years. So beyond that, I guess for a couple of minutes, what else do we have here? Yeah, back on the works thing. We'll do that again. So we have Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace you're saved through faith, not of yourselves. It's a free gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. As people are coming in now, I'm going to say that what that means is that if you could do works to warrant your salvation, that would mean that God owes you salvation. You would put God in debt. You know how silly that sounds, right? When you explain a verse like that, it's like, yeah, that sounds really stupid that you could put God in debt. But that's what working for your salvation means. You're putting God in debt. As in, I did this, God, you owe me, right? It sounds stupid. It is stupid. And that's what every religion is based on. Every single one. Unless you're fundamental Christian. Fundamental, probably Baptist would be the closest thing. I don't even know. Bible believing is just what we call it. All right. But there is so many denominations out there, like 20,000 or something. They actually have a count. It is something like 20,000 denominations out there. And even if the denomination is pretty solid, at some point they get into some weird thing that involves some sort of works somewhere. Like Seventh-day Adventists, they have a lot of kooky stuff, but it's not super heretical stuff. But a lot of what they're doing kind of sounds like works, even though what they're teaching largely, for the most part, is pretty good stuff. But the longer they go on, man, everybody wants to work for their salvation. Oh, you got to show up on Saturday. God's not going to like it if you don't show up on Saturday, right? The Catholics, they have the everything. Everything Catholic is works. Jehovah's Witnesses have their thing, but their big thing is they don't even believe Jesus is God. And at that point, who are you worshiping then? The other thing is these denominations or these religions out there like Islam and these that don't believe that Jesus is God the Bible says it multiple places, like point blank. But these religions and these, whatever you call them, the leaders of these different groups, they don't really have an answer as to like, if Jesus was just a guy, what good would pinning him to a cross do if he was just a guy? And their answer is going to be, well, he was a sinless guy. And then my answer, of course, back is that, so you're saying that we could actually live and be sinless, is what you're saying. And if that was the case, then we would be God. The whole thing crumbles in on itself. And that's where Jehovah's Witnesses and the likes of that are, is they don't believe Jesus is God. And I'm like, well, you're a crazy cult. Point blank. Just so many logical problems with a lot of these these guys that are really trying hard to get that donation money, I guess. So Hebrews 9:13, if the blood of bulls and goats, this goes to the Jews. There are some people who are fundamental Bible believing people who hold to this idea that people are saved differently throughout the generations and throughout the years. And they say, well, the Jews, they had to work for their salvation. I'm like, well, you just made yourself a crazy person. There's nothing that comes out of your mouth now that you can even listen to, because you don't even understand salvation. You don't understand the character of God. You don't understand the nature. You don't understand anything. Oh, the Jews, they worked. They killed the sacrifices, and they had the Saturday Sabbath, and the Bible point blank says that they never, not a single one of them ever fulfilled the law, ever. That was the purpose of the law, is to show that you couldn't keep it. But if that wasn't enough, we'll go to the book of Hebrews, where it says the blood of bulls and goats, ashes of a heifer, sprinkling of unclean, sanctifying for the purifying of flesh, the blood of bulls and goats should not take away sins. Paul cleared that up very, very specifically, and that all the crap that the Jews were doing was for their special thing that God had for them. It had nothing to do with their salvation. Nothing. Otherwise, Moses would be in hell, Abraham, all them guys. What happened to Abraham before Moses was around? There wasn't any law yet. What else? What was there? Faith. Oh, you mean in the book of Hebrews where it talked about all of these Old Testament saints having faith? You think that might have been what saved them? Sort of like how we're saved today? Wouldn't that make sense with the unchanging, perfect nature of God? Yeah, it would make sense. It's called logic. And then every counterfeit is works. Everything. And again, where the government comes into it is essentially they're just taking what is your fundamental morality that is based in the Bible, and they're making up their own. And if you don't like that, then they'll put you in jail, or they'll fine you, or they'll do whatever. And then they'll tell you that you can vote if you want to change the law, right? That's what they'll tell you. Right. Shepherd's ambassador haven't gotten a jab or a cooties test to this day. Me too. I haven't put on a mask either. What is interesting is I thought of a new idea that I'm putting to the test, is that there are some businesses and organizations out there that are requiring that as part of their employment. And they actually state that when you fill out an application. Well, because they're doing that, they have to take liability for anybody who applies for a job. Because it's a requirement for the job. And if you don't, then they say, well, unless you have a religious exemption or some other kind of exemption. And it's like, well, that's discrimination. You can't have preferential treatment for somebody because of a religion, right? That's discrimination. And you can't force somebody to take an experimental vaccine without taking any liability for it. Right? That's again is discrimination, violates HIPAA and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, all of these little things that roll through the head. But cooties is over now, guys. Right? It went away like that. think I said like 2 months ago when they ran out of money and they weren't going to fund it anymore, you started to see the dominoes falling over. And I said, yeah, it gives about a month or two. And sure enough, cooties is done with. Now we're off to Ukraine, right, guys? We're off to Ukraine. Jay says, saying you can get to heaven by your works is spitting in the face of Jesus Christ. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess while I'm up, that was the main thing that I had to say. I don't know if you guys have anything you'd want to add to that. I know that Jason, it looks like you survived. What's going on in Australia? Are they still doing all the concentration camps and all that stuff down there, or whatever they have going? Here we have a convoy or something going that's not getting any news because, of course, we're inside the country and they don't want to give any light on that. Have an article here. Convoy picks up cars and anti-Ukraine talking points ahead of Washington arrival. So this is from NBC News. Right? All these are more or less run by the CIA. This is the lefty. They would call it lefty, but remember, guys, there's no such thing as a left-right. It's all the same government. It's all the same beast. This is all just a distraction. But you see what they're saying about it is like some people who want their freedoms and their rights, they're calling them anti-Ukraine. So by default, the government says anybody who does not agree with what they're doing in Ukraine or Russia or whatever, however they're dealing with it, by default, you're an enemy of the state, right? Everybody's a criminal. If you're not a criminal today, you'll be one tomorrow, sort of a thing. This is how everything is controlled, right? I just thought that was very interesting. Anti-Ukraine. And I looked into it a little bit with the Ukraine thing, and it's like Ukraine's been in a civil war for decades. Half the country wants to be part of Russia, and Ukraine's government is super, 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 super corrupt. Want to know why? Because the United States put it there. Okay? What was the first thing that Ukraine did when Russia invaded? Ukraine turned off the bank accounts of its citizens, its own citizens. That's why Bitcoin went up by $5,000. It turned off the bank accounts of its own people. What a wonderful government. You would think they'd be handing out guns and food and rations and supplies, but no, it's all part of their plan. They turned off the people's bank accounts, so they didn't have any choice but to surrender. But if you say something like that, you'd be called anti-Ukrainian or something, right? Anti-Ukraine. So apparently this convoy that's in the United States is going to be getting close to Washington, D.C. by tomorrow, if not in there. And this is what the mainstream media has to say. The American offshoot of the Freedom Convoy that brought chaos to Canada's capital is promising to stop traffic outside of Washington, D.C. on Saturday. Actually, they're not. The people that are coordinating that and talking about that is they have no intentions of impeding any traffic or doing anything or even being inside the city. But hey, I mean, who cares about the truth? Exact plans remain vague. Friday, as the group hits the last pit stop in Maryland, the convoy, which organized on a pro-Trump and anti-jabber channels, right? The Telegram messaging app. We got to go after Telegram because they can't shut it down. That evil Telegram. They should have plotted on Facebook. Has picked up hundreds of cars, several of trucks since the group left the rural parking lot in California. According to extremism researchers. Where do you suppose those people get their money from? Extremism researchers following the movement. The convoy now consists of several dozen tractor-trailer trucks, hundreds of cars. The group is staging in Hagerstown, Maryland on Friday and ramping up for its final protest somewhere in Washington. So that's what's going on, and you can see that there's a lot of support out for it. There really isn't any news. It's kind of like, I would assume like in Canada, there was pretty much a media blackout. Frank could probably attest to it, but in America, it's the same thing. Anything that actually happens inside the country, we're not going to find out about, right? Anything that's important, unless it's a CIA psyop, right? Like that crap that happened at the Capitol last year. Yeah, that's a psyop. They want to cover that left, right, and center, and 24/7 news on that. They really want to cover Ukraine and feed you a bunch of propaganda on that because that's part of their program, man. They want that. But when something isn't part of their program and something is not part of their plan, miraculously, nobody wants to cover it. Good, bad, or ugly, or whatever, right? This freedom protest, nobody wants to cover it. But you get BLM in Minneapolis burning down Target. Oh, man, we got media everywhere. Everywhere. Well, around a dozen Telegram groups. We're back to, you see, the reason that they're calling out, they would just say social messaging apps if it was Twitter or if it was Facebook. But because it's Telegram, which is encrypted, and it's run by somebody who's not in the country, and I think it's kind of decentralized, they have to call it out as being evil. Like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies got to be called out as being evil because it bypasses sanctions. And when the loving Ukrainian government turns off its citizens' bank accounts, people can still transact in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is evil, right? So they're going to say, the government says, here Telegram is evil. Anything that they cannot control is evil. Many of whom have posted messages today, and they believe their convoy directly contributed to the mandate repeals. The group's demands are now vague and tied to what they call accountability. According to San Arnian, whatever, an extremism researcher. Sarah Ariano, extremism researcher. How do I get a job being an extremism researcher? I'm pretty extreme. Seems like I'd know a lot about it. I could use some work. I got a furnace to fix. That could mean financial accountability. It could be physical accountability. It could be legal accountability. Their inability to distinguish exactly what that means is where the concern lies. So, recently published a report on QAnon. We're still talking about QAnon. Okay, so apparently these guys who are just truckers, they are anti-Ukraine, pro-Trump, anti-vaxxer, Telegram users, and they're QAnon people. They didn't call them Nazis yet. I wonder if that's going to be the next article, right? I'm going to call them Nazi. Pretty ridiculous. So that's what's going on, but I did want to point it out because nobody else is really covering this. I'm guessing that it's not a psyop because the news media is not covering it. Okay. There really isn't much of anything on this, and they're pretty darn close. They've been traveling for 4 days. They're pretty darn close to Washington, D.C. Take a look at chat here. Josh says one guy escaped Ukraine using Bitcoin. Yeah. And you know what else happened in that is because of that happening, a lot of people purchased Bitcoin because it can happen in the United States, guys. People who are watching in the United States, they turned off people's bank accounts in Canada. Just like that. There's no laws. There's no judge's decision. There's no nothing. They just turned your stuff off. Why? Because all of the governments are run by the Federal Reserve, the International Monetary Fund, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Klaus Schwab. Whatever they say is what happens. Okay, that's it. You don't control the government. You ain't voting on anything. Okay? They control all. If you're going to plan that system, you got to put up with it. I've been recommending for a couple of years now to try and limit your exposure to the government as much as you possibly can. Obviously, not everybody can afford to go out and go buy a ranch somewhere. All right. But maybe if you're in the cities, you could move outside of city a little bit. You know, maybe you could, if you have a house, maybe you could get some chickens. Maybe you could get solar panels, right? Maybe you get some cryptocurrency. So if they turn your bank account off, you'll still be all right. You play outside of the Satan system, the government system. I mean, supporting it in any way is, you could really look at it and make a pretty good case for it being anti-God completely, right? By supporting it in any way. It's like a lot of people, like, I don't invest in garbage that, you know, like me investing in Monsanto or some arms manufacturer or something like that. No. But you can kind of equate the same argument to how the government gets funded and what the government does with your money. Okay? You don't have any say in that. So what else we got? So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, just to show how much of a nonsense machine this whole supposed war is. Okay. Russia blocks access to Facebook. Oh no. I mean, they're at war. You think they would have turned that off right away. But that's not really what the bullet point is. As you read through the article, it says that they kicked out CNN. Okay, as we go through it, I'm kind of trying to look for it here. Russia has escalated its crackdown on both traditional and social media as its war with Ukraine continues. Some companies like Twitter and Google have committed to labeling state-owned media and suspending advertising in Russia. Meanwhile, new law that would allow Russian authorities to jail anyone who spreads fake news about its military drove BBC to suspend. And when you, I don't know what's going to pop up here, but when you look it up, Russia threw out CNN. And it's like, so what? Wouldn't you automatically throw out people that are working for the American government? But they make a big deal out of it, like, oh, how dare they? We're the media, right? And you look at what America has done to Russia, or is attempts to do in all of this, because they're the bad man. America can do, cut off their access to the SWIFT network and all of these other sanctions that don't actually hurt anybody in Russia except the people. That I'm sure if they took a vote, they didn't vote to go to war in Ukraine. But there's people's bank accounts are getting turned off and all of these things, and Russian businesses that are in America are shut down because of what's going on. They didn't have anything to do with that. But here the liberal media is crying because they kicked out CNN and the BBC and they shut down Facebook. Well, why did they do that? If you actually believe that Russia is the enemy, wouldn't that be the first things you'd shut down? In reality, they all work together, but it seems pretty logical. But this is the number one article on the Sludge Report. This is the main link. Like it's a big deal. You know, of course you're going to throw out your spy agencies. Of course. And of course, they're saying the Ukraine nuke plant. Oh my. Oh, Putin's got the nuke plant. So what? What's he going to make? Is he going to turn the power off? I mean, so what? For people who aren't familiar with how a nuclear power plant works, it boils water. Okay, that's what nuclear power plants do. They boil water. Who cares? He's got a nuclear power plant. Russia's got a lot of nukes. They got a lot of nuclear power plants. Not a big deal. Do you see how, like, I'm supposed to care about this? I'm sure if I watch television, the nightly news would be nonstop. Poor Ukrainians, the evil Putin, and they give him the little mustache, make it out to be like this is World War II all over again or something like that. And this idea that like it seemingly people are so mind controlled that overnight people went from being worried they're going to die of some mysterious ailment called cooties to the next week we're all worried that we're going to be drafted and sent over to Ukraine. And that's how good the psychological programming works. Everybody's, oh, what's going on in Ukraine? Oh, the war. Who cares? Who cares? Half the people in that country want to be part of Russia. It's their own deal, right? But the truth of the situation is they have to keep the people focused on everything other than what's actually going on in their own lives and what's actually going on in the country so they can pull a fast one. What should be on the news round the clock is the fact inflation is over 20%. Okay. That should be on the news round the clock. It's not. You got to worry about some Ukrainian propaganda. Who apparently the president of Ukraine is a comedian who got his career start playing the president of Ukraine as a comedian, television actor. But that's legit. That's legitimate. He's not a puppet. No. It's not just all one big nonsense story. Nope. And about this idea, let's do one more thing here, and I'll take a look at chat and probably wrap up. About this thing that you think that Russia and China and these guys are America's enemies. Who does all of the manufacturing for America? China. Who have we been buddy-buddy with sending rockets into space and sharing research projects and doing all of these joint ventures since World War II? Russia. Who bailed out Russia when their country broke up under Gorbachev? America bailed them out. But we're enemies? We're enemies. For those of you who don't know, we'll do a little bit of a flat Earth thing. Not necessarily flat Earth. We'll just pretend space and the moon landing and all that stuff is real. Because this is official stuff, all right? Now, America apparently taped over the VHS cassette recorder of the data of how to get to the moon. And that's why we haven't been to the moon. That is the official story. The literal official story is that NASA taped over the flight recorder data of how they were able to get to the moon and back. And that's according to Don Pettit, the main guy over there at NASA. So, ever since, we need to launch something up into high orbit, so they say, we do not have a rocket. We had the Saturn V way back when, where we supposedly went to the moon. We had the Saturn V rocket, which all of the blueprints and the manufacturing and all the tools and all the parts and anything that would tell you how this rocket was built was thrown in a landfill or burned or incinerated because NASA needed more room on their VHS tapes and they needed more room in the warehouse for other junk. So they completely got rid of the Saturn V rocket so that no one could look at it and say that it couldn't do what they say it could do, but there is no Saturn V. So every single rocket that has been launched into supposed high Earth orbit, official story, according to NASA, was done by Russia. The Soyuz rocket, launches everything into space. But what about Elon Musk? Elon hadn't had nothing to do with it until a couple of years ago. It's always been Russia. Who's up there on the space station right now? Bunch of Americans, some Chinamen, and Russian. Are they all having a knife fight up there? Are they all knife fighting? All right. The Soyuz rocket was the main form of transportation to the International Space Station between 2011 and 2020. And then Elon Musk set up his film studio, where if you've ever seen that, it looks ridiculous, right? It's a big open room with 3 folding chairs in it and a bunch of guys that are just waving their hands in the air like there's something there. And then they project something on the screen to make it look like they're touching something. It's really stupid looking. But before that, it's Russia. But these guys are our bitter, bitter, bitter enemies. Bitter enemies. Yeah, Putin was around there in 2020. Putin's been in there for about 10 years now. These guys are not our enemies. And nothing you hear about what's going on over there is the truth. Nothing. Not a shred. CNN will no longer broadcast in Russia while we continue to evaluate the situations and our next steps moving forward. Yeah. So don't get all worked up about the war. It ain't a war. I mean, yeah, it certainly sucks for the Ukrainian people and the Russian people, but that's not like the government doesn't care. No more than the government cares about the people in this country. They're a self-preserving beast. Josh, that's why the crypto market went up. Well, that is one of the reasons. Honestly, I think that the crypto market is being suppressed. Like today, it's down 38.9. It dropped like $4,000 in the last 2 days for no real reason, and it's just a lot of manipulation. The Federal Reserve is working overtime right now to suppress the price of gold and suppress the price of Bitcoin, because if it was allowed to go up naturally, people would know that the dollar is absolute toast. I forget what it was. I think it was the war when their war started, when they actually for real started it or drove their tanks across some imaginary line on a map somewhere, which is all it really is. Governments, that's all they are. Imaginary stack of papers, lines on the ground. Gold shot up by like 10%, which hasn't happened in a decade. But then after a few hours, it immediately shot back down. It's like the Goldman Sachs got back into their pumping and dumping so they could control the gold market again. And that's just sadly the way that it goes. But what's great about Bitcoin is the fact that you can't do that forever because there's only so much Bitcoin. Now, if you can just keep printing money and printing money and printing money and printing money, you can keep something like gold down forever. But in the case of Bitcoin, there isn't enough Bitcoin to sell to keep the market down. It's something like 70 or 80% of the Bitcoin that's out there has been held by people who have held it for longer than a year, meaning they're not going to get rid of it. Okay. So, I mean, what are you going to do? Eventually you're going to run out of Bitcoin to sell. And then the price is going to skyrocket, of course. But that's all part of the game. You see, when you have this unlimited money, I mean, what would you do? For instance, this is what the government does, by the way. What would you do if you had a money printer where you could print as much money as you wanted? And what would you do with it personally? Whatever you think you would do with it personally, that's what the government is doing with it. All right. Taking over little countries, putting everybody under your thumb, doing all this stuff. That's what the government is doing with it. Josh says, where would you suggest to look at to read into nuclear power plants being a lie? I'm not the best guy to ask about that, but there is documentaries out there that you can find on YouTube. I wish Jack was here. He'd be able to tell you. There's a nuclear physicist guy who did many interviews talking about how safe nuclear power is, and I think about how you might want to look into how not 3 Mile Island or 5 Mile Island. There was a power plant that melted down in Russia, Chernobyl. You can look into how that was a fraud. And there's people who have been building these things forever who talk about how nuclear energy is 100% safe. Radiation doesn't kill people. And this guy, is on camera eating what's supposed to be radioactive material. Okay. And, he's fine. And he talks about it and explains like what it is. All it is it's like a magnet almost, where you have a North Pole and a South Pole sort of a thing. And you put the magnets a certain way and you get this resistance, or you put them the other way and they attract. Well, if you put them in a way where they're resisting, the molecules will vibrate and it produces heat. That's what radiation is. Like a radiator. My radiators are broken right now, so I have no heat for the weekend. But radiated heat, that's where that comes from. Radiators. And how power plants work, all of them, all they do is boil water. Okay. I mean, dams. Okay. A dam spins turbines by having water thrown through the turbines, but all of the power plants on land, they 100% work by boiling water. So you have your nuclear elements, instead of burning coal or burning oil or burning whatever to boil water, you just have these elements that when you get them close to each other, they produce heat. Okay. That's it. And you produce enough heat to where you're boiling water. That's it. That's all there is to it. And, the idea of nuclear weapons is stupid. Okay. Because you can't take anything in the splitting of the atoms, right? When has this ever been done? And can you prove it exists? No. How does nuclear energy work? It boils water. That's how it works. Okay. Then the people that build these things are on record all over the place about remarkably safe they are in handling radioactive materials and things like this. Are there things out there that are poisonous and do we emit something that could hurt people? Well, yes, because X-rays and things like that do hurt you. There is certain types of radiation that do hurt people, but the stuff they're using in power plants is the safest stuff that they can use. Why? Because it's not in the militaries. It's not the military stuff. It's stuff that they let regular guys off the street play with. Okay. Does it mean they can make a bomb out of it, make it explode? No. It just means it's safer to deal with. Yeah. Boiling water, man. That's your nuclear anything, but they like to use the nuclear terminology to scare people and to make something seem way more advanced than what it really is. Okay. Way more advanced. Oh, the radiation and it produces power. It's like, no, the steam produces power. It's the steam. That's it. Talking about the rapture can happen anytime. Yes. I would be surprised if it. I think we got a little bit. I got a little bit of time. We're getting close, though, man. We can really see the New World Order creeping up. I mean, the New World Order is already here. It's been here for a while, but I mean, to the point where, and here's the proof of this, guys. When the entire world shuts down for a fantasy virus, you know who runs the world then. It ain't the governments. It ain't Biden. It ain't Putin. It's above them. Where do all of those governments who were involved in the cooties nonsense, where do they all get their money from? The World Bank, the Federal Reserve, Rothschild, Klaus Schwab, the Catholic Church. Okay. Those are the people who run the world. And there are certain outlier countries who didn't have any part of it. Those might be the places you maybe want to go because they're probably kind of crypto friendly too. And there's probably not a whole lot of government New World Order intervention there. One of them might be directly south of the border if you're in America. Just saying. That wall they built here is to keep people in. Am I going to do videos in the future refuting Husky? No. As far as I know, he's been doing his living off the grid stuff, which I said many years ago. It's like he should be doing that and begging for money that way as opposed to trying to pretend he's a pastor. It makes him look really stupid to collect money for a church ministry headquarters and then talk about how no one's allowed to come to his ministry headquarters. Makes you look like a fool. Hey, yep. Yeah, old Husky. He's back. He's back. Well, you can sit around and as long as he's playing with firewood, and talking about what a rugged man he is that begs for money constantly. I mean, the kindness of strangers feed his wife and child. That's how much of a man he is. Let's see how the man goes out there and how he lives off the grid with his 3 houses. Paid for on the backs of people in GoFundMe. Yep. Good for him, though. Good for him. I mean, in any case, he has his place, as I was saying earlier, is that everyone's got their little spot, and their little, purpose or something like that. And his is to be a heretic and a liar and a fraudster and to be made fun of. That's his purpose. Okay. Is what it is. Rothschild and their family and all these guys, their job is to be, Satan's minions, right? And without these sorts of conflicts and without this sorts of all these different ideas being out there, you wouldn't be able to find the truth. If everything was all just straightforward and there wasn't any lies and there wasn't any charlatans and there wasn't any idiots out there like that, life would be pretty boring, number one, and you would have zero growth, right? There's nothing to learn. There is a pretty well case to be made that one of the best things that could have happened to Adam was him falling, because then he actually had to learn and do things, and he didn't have his glorified stuff, and he was cursed, but it also gave him purpose, because what did he have before? What was his purpose before that? He already named the animals. Now what's he going to do? They didn't have Netflix yet, right? So it gave him purpose. So anyways, that's what I got, guys. I don't know if you guys, if you guys got any other comments or anything like that. Otherwise, we're going to shut it down. So yeah, government is Satan's religion. And remember, guys, you're all criminals. Okay? Everybody can point out some point where they broke the law. Whatever country you happen to be in, whatever city, town, wherever you happen to be, right? That's the government. That's Satan's religion. Just kind of counterfeiting morality and truth. I mean, it's like, does anyone think it's a sin if you drive 10 miles over the speed limit? Who is the authority that says that you could only drive that fast? And when did you agree to doing that? All these crazy questions. Right? And especially in the speed limit case, because everyone's familiar with speed limits. There are states in America that didn't have speed limits on their highways. Okay? There was never any problems. What was the reason that speed limits were instituted? To fleece the public for money. Why is the speed limit 55 miles an hour on a generic highway anywhere in America? Because the federal government turned on its money printer and said, hey, Minnesota, hey, Wisconsin, hey, California, we'll give you XYZ number of millions of billions of dollars if you set your speed limits to 55 miles per hour. if you pass seatbelt laws in your state, if you do this, if you do that, and it all trickles down from the top. And these people who are handing out this money, they have a money printer in their closet. It means that none of those laws have any value or any worth or anything. There's nothing to them. It's at the whim of whatever any idiot out on Capitol Hill, whatever any idiot comes up with out there, it's automatically financed because it doesn't cost anybody anything. None of it costs anybody anything. You just print more money. And it's a system that they already know it's going to crash. They're not these people who run a lot of people you hear who want to talk about politics and things, and they'll say things like, well, now the government's starting to pay for their stupid mistakes and things like that. And it's like, these guys aren't stupid. They're following a playbook. They know what's going on. They're not dumb. They didn't accidentally print $13 trillion. They didn't accidentally print as much money as has ever been printed in America up until that day. They didn't accidentally do that. They didn't think, oh, it's going to cause inflation. Oh, what are we going to do now? We're so stupid. No. What is the most logical conclusion? Okay, guys, when something appears to be a certain way, and the easiest, most logical thing is that they wanted it to happen, they're intending to crash the economy, that's probably the right answer. And of course, you can do research and you can find out that, yes, indeed, it is a plan to crash but when you're looking at like nobody wanting to go to work, minimum wage being super low compared to inflation, and nobody getting raises, and all of these problems that are going on in the world. Okay, it's not an accident. It's not an accident. Remember, guys, you'll own nothing and be happy. So don't get caught up in politics and all of this stuff. Yeah. So that's what we got. Welcome back, Josh. I was about to take off now. Random guy, how's it going, man? Yeah, Josh, the nuclear power plants, when Jack's on here, he's the one to talk to, but probably look up the fraud of Chernobyl, because Chernobyl, they say that, supposedly what you're taught in schools with the nuclear stuff is that, we got radiation. It's so bad. It's there for thousands of years, this radiation that kills everybody that goes near it. Well, Chernobyl has had wildlife and big, huge trees that obviously have been there the entire time during this Chernobyl accident. So obviously the nuclear fallout is a total load of BS. Okay. You just look at what's going on and what they're doing. And like, you look at when we supposedly dropped a bomb in Japan, you look into that a little bit, and they didn't drop a nuke in Japan. They firebombed it. And they have witness testimony and things like that on documentaries on that are still available on YouTube too. And people that did testing who were setting off what they call were nuclear test sites and things during World War II, the soldiers who were there reported that they set off TNT on these islands where they were supposedly testing these they just set off TNT to make it look like they had a big bomb. Why is it Russia developed a nuclear weapon a month after America did, and nobody else has made one yet without America giving it to them? Because it's all nonsense. It's all utter BS. Just like space, and that we've got an international space station up there with a Russian guy and an American guy up there with their switchblades out that are going toe to toe to fight over Ukraine, right? It's all nonsense, gobbledygook stuff that's not worth wasting your time on. What is worth, putting some effort into is buying a little extra food, stuff that's going to last a little while, and look at where your weaknesses are and your vulnerabilities are when it comes to depending on the government. And everybody's got them. Obviously, people are dependent on the power grid. People are dependent on the whole supply chain, right? And I talked about supply chain 2.5 years ago about this is how it works, and this is why you really got to watch out for it. and, be outside of cities where you can't, the local politics and having BLM come in there and burn everything down. You want to be outside of that, and things like that. It's way more worthwhile. Or learning a new hobby, right? Learn a new hobby. Don't worry about what's going on in Ukraine. That's their problem. We got bigger problems here. I said, and I don't know if it was a comment on my own video or a comment on someone else's. And I said, well, what's going on in Ukraine, at least we'll just say that the whole war thing is real. Okay. What's going on in Ukraine is a lot better than what's going on in America and Canada, because in Ukraine, at least the Ukrainians know who to shoot at, right? They got a red star on their little hat, their little fur hats they wear. Then that's the bad guy. It's the guy that's coming to take our stuff. But in America and Canada, people think that their governments are working for them. And they're just fed lies and lies and lies, and off they go. Oh, they said I need to get a jab. Oh, who is the enemy? Because everybody knows somebody who works for the government, probably their neighbor, probably their friends. Because in America, something like 60% of all the jobs are government jobs. That's when you know that the state has taken over everything. Okay. How can you say the state is bad when, so many regular people work for them? It's like, because they're all just following orders. How can NASA not be going to space? They got all these people. None of the people that work for NASA know what the hell is going on. And it's not very hard. They've been doing it in the military forever. Compartmentalization. And you look at compartmentalization as far as America goes, they got that down to a pretty good science, where they just turn off the news in certain areas that they don't want people to know about stuff. Okay. Completely compartmentalized. And like I said, your reliance on the state also comes to things like the internet and things like Google and these sorts of things. Obviously, Facebook. Yeah. Much better to spend your time doing that. I mean, honestly, as opposed to watching what's going on in Ukraine and Russia and all that, you're better off playing a video game. You would get more out of the video game and learn more than you would any of the nonsense with that. Jay says, go for a walk and exercise. Yeah, except out here, it's like 0 degrees outside, so it's going to be fun without a furnace. It's crappy, man. It's been a bad year in Minnesota. Just not snow at all so much, but it's been like -10, -20 overnight for like 2 months. Not fun. Not fun. Right now, I mean, as far as us is, we'll be fine, because I think it's supposed to be up near 30 tomorrow. I don't know about Sunday or the next day, so it'll be fine in here. I got my crypto miners to keep us warm. But yeah, it's bad. Josh, it's been weird in California, Northern California. They're always playing with the weather out there. That is one good thing I can say about the town that I live in, is that there isn't any chemtrailing. Like, they're always chemtrailing Minneapolis, St. Paul, because they have a really good cover. There's an international airport there. But they don't have nothing out here. Anyways, now I'm starting to ramble on. Anyways, you guys, I'll have a good night, and I'm going to reiterate the fact that as bad as things get, and they're going to get crappier. Hate to say it, but it's in the Bible. Doesn't mean we're in the tribulation or anything. It just, we know where it's headed. And before you lose hope or give up on anything, understand where you're going. You don't have anything to really lose. And also understand that God doesn't create things for no purpose, right? And he created each and every one of you guys. So with that, we are going to be out of here. Take care, and God bless.